since Kamala Harris entered the race just under 4 weeks ago, the polls have narrowed, and the lead that Trump enjoyed a month ago has virtually disappeared, especially and most crucially in the key swing states, those that will decide the outcome of the election.
Every Thursday, we head to the United States to find out what's happening, particularly in the presidential election in Washington, D.C., and in the United States as a whole. Alistair Dawber is the Washington correspondent of the Times and the Sunday Times. Good afternoon to you.
Hi, good morning, Adam.
Well, we've heard a lot in the last couple of days about Donald Trump. Famously, he was talking a lot in his interview online with Elon Musk, and he's had a lot of abuse for President Harris, including calling her a left-wing lunatic.
They're rewriting history and making Kamala sound like a moderate when in fact she is far left, like far left.
Worse than Bernie Sanders. She is considered more liberal by far than Bernie Sanders. She's a radical left lunatic.
Now, worse than Bernie Sanders, according to Donald Trump. But yesterday, the Republican strategist, Amy Tarkanian, told me that she thinks Trump should start to focus on policy rather than personal attacks against his opponent.
We need to focus on things that actually matter to the voters. We don't care about the crowd size comparison. We all want to know, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for my kids and my family? Are you going to help, rebuild the economy? Are you going to help, put food on the table and put clothes on my children? Are you going to keep my family safe? Enough of this name calling nonsense. We're all sick of it.
Now, Alistair Dawber, is everyone sick of the name calling nonsense?
I think they probably are, not only among the general public, but also, as you heard there, among Republican strategists as well. They are frustrated, I think concerned as well, that since Kamala Harris entered the race just under 4 weeks ago, the polls have narrowed, and the lead that Trump enjoyed a month ago has virtually disappeared, especially and most crucially in the key swing states, those that will decide the outcome of the election. Now, what they also say is Trump should stop concentrating on personality, because actually he's got quite a good story to tell when it comes to policy. Kamala Harris is seen, polls show, as being weak on the economy. People generally think that Donald Trump would do a better job of managing the economy. Kamala Harris was in charge of managing and securing the southern border when Joe Biden first came into office, and we know that that's been a fairly disastrous policy area for the Democrats. So not only are people saying, look, Donald Trump really needs to concentrate on what matters to Americans. When he does talk about what matters to Americans, actually he's got quite a lot to say, and he's got a fight against Kamala Harris in that sense.
So why doesn't he concentrate on policy? Is it just in his nature to be abusive?
I think so. I mean, every opponent that's come up against Donald Trump, we know, has earned a nickname: Crooked Hillary, Sleepy Joe, Lion Ted Cruz. All these people are now laughing Kamala Harris. His brand of politics is very personal. He engages in personal attacks. He's been accused of, he's not accused. He's questioned Kamala Harris's race. He's chosen that sort of avenue of attack rather than on policy. And the polls show it's not working. There are many people around Donald Trump who are saying this needs to change. It needs to change quickly.
But he also seems a bit sort of discombobulated by the fact that he's up against a woman who maybe looked quite good on the front of Time magazine.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, Donald Trump was expecting to face Joe Biden, and spent an awful lot of time talking about the personal aspect of the campaign. He spent an awful lot of time talking about Joe Biden's mental capacity to do the job, whether he was too old. Now, Kamala Harris is in the race, not Joe Biden. It's Donald Trump that's the old man, the guy who occasionally stumbles over words and whatever else. She's seen as a lot fresher. She's seen as new. And as I say, I mean, he keeps attacking her on a personal level, and her vice presidential candidate as well, Tim Walz.
I mean, he even sort of said he quite fancied her, didn't he, at one point?
Well, he suggested that she's got the Time magazine have got Kamala Harris on the front page of their issue this week, and he thinks she looks good on it. I mean, he said that she looked quite like his own wife. Which I think was meant to be a compliment.
Fairly extraordinary. Now, what about Kamala Harris? I mean, is it fair to say that she's ducking talking about policy?
I think it probably is fair to say that, yeah. Kamala Harris is now, we've all known that Kamala Harris is going to be the Democratic candidate for nearly a month. She hasn't done an interview. She hasn't sat down with journalists, be it in the print media like us or the broadcasters. She has been accused of getting her team to change headlines so that they look better on Google searches when people are looking at various policies. She does appear to be to not want to engage with the press, not want to explain her agenda, really. Now, of course, we've got the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, the big party conference in Chicago next week. It's traditional for the party nominee to sit down with one of the big US broadcasters ahead of their big speech. It'll probably be on Thursday night next week, and explain what their agenda is, what they intend to do in office. We don't know that's going to happen. Donald Trump has another press conference later today where he will make the point that she's running away, she's not speaking to the press. There he is setting out his agenda. And again, on the Democratic side, there are a lot of people saying that she needs to get out in front of the media and explain some of these policy areas that so far she seems to be avoiding.
I mean, I have seen counter arguments being made by her supporters saying, you know, why should she bother with the mainstream media? After all, she's out there giving speeches, rallies. She's getting attention that way. As you say, she's got the convention where presumably we're going to get more policy ideas. And the suggestion is that, you know, the mainstream media has become quite trivial. You know, the only story it was doing was about whether Joe Biden was up to it, and it will probably look for what people are calling vibes about her rather than substance.
Well, quite possibly that's an argument, and her campaign will decide whether or not she wants to do that. It's traditional for politicians of any hue and in any country to speak to the press. It's a way of engaging with the public. I guess her campaign will say, look at what's happened to the polls in the last month. We don't need to do much press because the polls have narrowed. She's ahead in the key swing states now. What she's doing is working. But there will be a consistent issue or a consistent question, if you like, as to whether or not she is capable of holding her own. Whether she can explain her agenda to the American people, and whether people will vote for her or not on that basis.
I mean, it's quite ironic, really, that the press is unhappy because Trump is saying, you know, the mainstream media are in love with Kamala Harris.
Exactly, and you know, it's as you well know, Adam, we are a convenient organ to be hit with a stick, if you like, by candidates that don't like how their campaigns are going. It is traditional, as I say, for politicians to speak to the media, especially in the run up to an election campaign. And as long as Kamala Harris doesn't do that, I think she'll be criticised.
I mean, she does have a travelling press pack, though, doesn't she? And she talks to them.
She does on an off-the-record basis. So there'll be, wherever she goes, there will be a group of 5 or 6 journalists. The vice presidential travelling press pool is much smaller than the presidential one. And she speaks to them on an off-the-record, non-attributable basis, and they pick up snippets and bits and pieces. But this isn't a situation where she's being questioned on policy, on her record, in front of the full glare of studio lights or on an on-the-record interview.
And where are we now on presidential debates, or indeed vice presidential debates, which might be quite juicy?
That's right. So we know we've got one on the 10th of September. That will be broadcast on ABC between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. There are 2 other dates in September, the 4th and the 25th, when other broadcasters have pitched to do debates, but at the moment we've only got one. And then it's likely, I think, on the 1st of October, we will get a vice presidential debate. But again, that's still to be confirmed. Tim Walz, the Democrat, has agreed to this date on October the 1st, and we're waiting to see whether J.D. Vance will do the same.
And finally, the big question. I've been talking to Republican and Democrat nominees this week, what they call surrogate supporters this week. And there seems to be a division as to whether we really have seen a watershed moment in American politics with Kamala Harris and the Democrats, perhaps even in races for Congress, looking really credible as potential winners in a way that they certainly didn't before. Do you think that's happened?
Yeah, I mean, just look at the polls. I mean, there was absolutely no doubt that the presidential race, particularly, is now much closer than it was a month ago. I think had Joe Biden stayed as the candidate, Donald Trump would have won the race fairly comfortably. I think that's now different. I think Kamala Harris has brought something fresh. I mean, we interviewed Frank Luntz, the pollster, a couple of weeks ago, and he said in 2016, when Hillary Clinton was the candidate against Donald Trump, America wasn't ready to elect a female president. He said 8 years on, it absolutely is now. I think Kamala Harris's race, her gender, aren't really factors at all. I think the election will be decided on policy and personality, both Trump's and Kamala Harris's.
Alistair Dawber of The Times, thank you very much indeed for those Washington whispers.